Stone Cold, the Hellraiser is back!
Here we go! Evolution of the Shield!
John Cena versus the Showstopper!
Hulk Hogan and The Rock in the same ring!
You will never take my place at the head of the table!
Undertaker! On the Hell's Gate submission! Oh my God! What?
My God, Michaels! Just kick Cena's head off!
The Monday Night Wars have come to WrestleMania!
It'll be The Rock! It'll be Austin one-on-one!
Third and five to the Undertaker!
Do you believe in miracles?
The streak is over!
Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome back to WWE Retro on the WWE podcast on Friday, November 4th, as we are one day away from Crown Jewel, and we're going to jump right into it today because I've been looking forward to get to this, episode for just about a week. I tried valiantly last week to get this thing recorded. As I said on the State of WWE this past Monday with Matt, I just could not overcome the cold I was battling, or the flu, whatever you want to call it, but it seems like everyone is getting sick nowadays, and Matt battled through it. I was not able to, but we are here today. And if you guys caught the State of WWE, I gave you a hint of an underrated WrestleMania that I would be covering today. And I wonder if any of you guys guessed it, but today we are going back to 2006 for WrestleMania 22 from Chicago, Illinois. And I remember watching this WrestleMania live, and I actually watched it at the movie theater, believe it or not. The only time I ever went to go see a WrestleMania at the movie theater, and only the second pay-per-view I ever saw at a movie theater. I also saw Vengeance 2006. So 2006 was the year that I really wanted to get my movie theater fix in terms of the wrestling shows there. And this was a point in WWE where you were still really in the Ruthless Aggression era, but you were starting to see maybe a little bit of a transition out of it. And this was the height of John Cena. It was kind of the height of Batista, but Batista was on the shelf with injury. He had hurt himself in early January and had to relinquish the World Heavyweight Championship. You had Randy Orton kind of coming into the fold at this point as a full-time main eventer after kind of regressing a bit in 2005. And you really just got a sense of a changing of the guard at this pay-per-view. And obviously another big thing that WWE was dealing with in the build-up to WrestleMania 22 was the tragic and sudden death of Eddie Guerrero. And it had Eddie Guerrero not passed away, and I guess before we get right into the card here, we'll talk about what may have been had he not passed away suddenly in November of 2005. You know, I always thought that the plan was for him to win the Royal Rumble in 2006 and challenge Batista for the World Heavyweight Championship. That's what I always believed it was because of where they were kind of going with the SmackDown storyline during the time of his death. But you've also had reports that he was going to be involved in an interpromotional match with the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels, which would have arguably been better. No, he wouldn't have won the Rumble and main evented WrestleMania, but could you think of a better in-ring match than Shawn Michaels versus Eddie Guerrero? A dream match for the ages that we never saw. So either way you cut it, the death of Eddie Guerrero really kind of threw WWE's plans into a tailspin, whether he was going to win the Rumble and challenge Batista for the world title. And obviously Batista got hurt, so he probably would have challenged whoever the world champion was at that time for the world championship. Or he would have had what would have been for sure an instant classic with Shawn Michaels. So either way, we lost out on a great match at this WrestleMania. And to be honest, we lost out on years and years of Eddie Guerrero. So it was crazy to think that even nowadays we hear the Eddie chants and how much of an impact and lasting impact he has had on the wrestling world and the WWE fans, or professional wrestling fans really. Everyone knows and loves Eddie Guerrero. So as we start breaking down the card here, you have the interpromotional battle royal before it goes on the air, WrestleMania 22, that is, and it is Viscera winning the Royal Rumble, or the Battle Royal, the Royal Rumble, the Battle Royal. He last eliminates Snitsky in just over 6 minutes. And this was the second WrestleMania in a row that they had done this, that on the pre-show, or I guess at that point it was still Sunday Night Heat, they had the interpromotional battle royal with members from both Raw and SmackDown. The year before, Booker T had won it. This year it is Viscera, and this is when they were kind of pushing Viscera as the world's largest love machine, and he'd come out in pajamas and whatnot. And it was a pretty cool, funny storyline for him. He also started tagging with Val Venus at this time. So a pretty funny point in time for the career of Viscera, who obviously started off as Mabel and then joined the Ministry of Darkness and then kind of transitioned into a comedic character. Then for the actual opening of the show, you have the Big Show and Kane successfully defend their World Tag Team Championships, aka the Raw Tag Team Championships, against Carlito and Chris Masters in 6 minutes and 42 seconds. And Big Show and Kane were on, in my opinion, and this is obviously very subjective, a historic run as the World Tag Team Champions on Monday Night Raw. And they had won the titles against Cade and Murdoch at the Taboo Tuesday pay-per-view back in October of 2005. And back then, what would happen is you'd have 3 contenders who would be up for nomination to face the world champion. In this case, it was Big Show, Kane, and Shawn Michaels. And the 2 who did not get elected by the fans, because as you remember, Taboo Tuesday, back then, you would go on and you would vote for matches and challengers who you wanted. And apparently it was all very legit, which is crazy to think about. They covered it in one of the Ruthless Aggression documentary episodes, but I guess you have to take them at your word. Maybe they're lying, who knows. But the 2 ones who didn't get voted into the world title match would challenge for the tag team championships. And you have Kane and Big Show here as the 2 biggest monsters in not only Raw, but in the WWE as a whole. And I thought it really, really made them relevant. And you had Kane, maybe not lost in the no man's land, but following the split with Lita and Edge, it becomes a Mr. Money in the Bank. You kind of just had Kane not doing a whole lot of anything. He got a bit stale. Obviously, in 2003, you have him demask, go on a crazy monster heel run. Then he slowly transitions to a babyface in early 2005. And then once he became a babyface, there wasn't a whole lot for him to do. You know, Kane wasn't ever really a character that you could have as a world champion, even as a singles champion, because there wasn't a whole lot of depth to his character on a week-to-week basis. Like, in terms of on a macro scale, there was obviously a ton of depth to his character, but there would go through stretches with Kane where, you know, my buddy would always say it, that, like, whenever you pissed off the general manager or the authority figure in charge at that time, you'd just get fed to Kane. And that's why I thought when they paired him with the Big Show, who was obviously new to Monday Night Raw, it made a lot of sense, and it kind of gave them a new purpose as kind of just like the absolute like top dogs, the beasts, the heavies on Monday Night Raw. And when you saw the program between Raw and SmackDown building to Survivor Series 2005, they really booked Kane and the Big Show to look extremely strong, as their gimmick kind of became just tracking down Batista, outnumbering him, and chokeslamming him through any object that was around, whether that be the announce table or a car outside in a parking lot brawl. And they built them very, very strong here going into WrestleMania. And then when you look on the challenger side of things, Carlito and Chris Masters, these were 2 guys who were probably the biggest up-and-comers on Monday Night Raw at this point. And to be honest, I was a little surprised that they didn't get the victory. And given the fact that Kane and Big Show would drop the championships to the Spirit Squad later that month, I believe it was either the Monday Night Raw right after WrestleMania 22 or shortly thereafter, I thought it was a bit weird that they decided to give it to the Spirit Squad instead of Carlito and Chris Masters. But I digress. Either way, a good match to open up the card. Then in the second ever Money in the Bank ladder match, you have Bobby Lashley versus Finlay versus Matt Hardy versus Ric Flair versus Rob Van Dam versus Intercontinental Champion Shelton Benjamin, the only returning member from the original Money in the Bank ladder match that went 12 minutes and 14 seconds. And what do you know? We get the reports this week that Triple H is planning to potentially scrap the Money in the Bank pay-per-view and reinstate it back on the WrestleMania card, which I think would be pretty cool. I think the less gimmick pay-per-views, the better. I think the Royal Rumble is one that kind of is the OG, if you will, that works very well. I didn't think that Money in the Bank was all that bad, but I have always more time for another very high-profile match at a WrestleMania. And in terms of who would win it at WrestleMania 22, I think it was someone that the fans were very, very happy to see finally get a big victory in WWE. So Rob Van Dam wins the second ever Money in the Bank ladder match, and I think it was a guy who deserved it, right? Rob Van Dam was a fan favorite since he joined WWE in 2002, and obviously goes on to win the WWE Championship at One Night Stand that year, pay-per-view that I covered recently. But obviously his push would be cut short because of being busted with a DUI. Then you get John Bradshaw Layfield challenging Chris Benoit for the United States Championship, a match that went 9 minutes and 48 seconds. And in a surprising victory, JBL wins his first ever United States Championship. And, you know, I think that Benoit had been on a pretty good run here since moving back to SmackDown in the summer of 2005, and really kind of found his niche in the mid-card of SmackDown, and really made that US Championship feel important. He did a really good job with the United States Championship in 06 and even into 07. before obviously the tragedy that took place. But this felt like a big match, like a high-profile match for a mid-card championship at a WrestleMania, and I'm a big proponent of making mid-card championships feel important, and I feel like I'm not alone in that. But certainly, JBL, a former WWE champion, the year before had main evented the SmackDown side of things by dropping the championship to John Cena and putting over John Cena in the process for the first time in a world title setting. And Chris Benoit, also a former world champion in his own right, who closed the show at WrestleMania 22 years prior. So JBL getting the victory to secure his first U.S. championship, a good match and a very important match, in my opinion, for the United States Championship. Then in arguably the most, shocking conclusion to a match, you get Edge versus Mick Foley in a hardcore match, no hardcore title at this point. And this was Mick Foley's first match in just about 2 years. His last match coming at Backlash 2004 when he had a hardcore match against Randy Orton. And this was a match that they had been building for quite some time. And in kind of a recurring theme here, Mick Foley was the guy used to put over an up-and-coming heel that Vince McMahon and WWE had very high hopes for. We saw him do it with Triple H, we saw him do it with Randy Orton, and here we are doing it with Edge. And they actually brought Joey Styles out to call this match, which was weird, right? Because during this time in WWE, Joey Styles was the play-by-play guy for Monday Night Raw, but for this particular WrestleMania, they brought back Jim Ross to call it. But then for this match, they bring out Joey Styles. And this was a brutal match, a gruesome match, and the ending of this match surely lived up to, well, I think it exceeded expectations, and to this day, still kind of is shocking to watch. So Edge hits the spear through a flaming table and secures the victory in 14 and a half minutes. And this was a match that, in my opinion, completed the coronation of Edge as a main eventer. And obviously, he had cashed in Money in the Bank several months prior to secure his first ever world championship against John Cena, a run that was very short-lived. He dropped it in less than a month back to Cena at the Royal Rumble. And then this was the match that I think really just shot him and secured him as a main eventer. And obviously he would go on a tag team run with Mick Foley. And all in all, just an absolutely brilliant contest at a WrestleMania and something that really kind of put Edge over. And on the flip side, really kind of got Mick Foley back on a relevant scale. Then, in kind of a throwaway match, you have the Boogeyman defeat Booker T and Sharmell, actually, in an intergender handicap match, in a match that went 3 minutes and 43 seconds. I mean, this was what it was. Felt bad for Booker T, although he would get his vindication later on in the year as becoming the world champion. But, yeah, it was what it was. Not much to break down here. Then Mickie James defeats Trish Stratus to become the new WWE Women's Champion in 8 minutes and 48 seconds. Obviously, this was the whole single white female angle. I really liked it. I really, to this day, always thought Mickie James was an excellent women's competitor. And you have the infamous spot in this match where Mickie James grabs the crotch area of Trish Stratus and proceeds to lick her hand. And the famous call of Jim Ross when Mickie James would secure the victory is that the lunatic is now the champion, or the psycho is now our champion, something along those lines. And this crowd was very rebellious, I guess, in a lot of ways. And I remember in this match in particular, and obviously in the main event that we'll get to, the crowd was really behind the heel Mickie James and booing Trish Stratus. And it was a lot of, kind of contradiction to traditional wrestling fans. And it was one of the first times I ever really realized this. And the Mickie James love here was the first instance of it on this pay-per-view. Then you get The Undertaker defeating Mark Henry in a casket match in 9 minutes and 28 seconds. Arguably The Undertaker's most underwhelming WrestleMania match, certainly in the Attitude Era, or the Ruthless Aggression era. Maybe his early matches weren't great back in the 90s. But I mean, I get it that they were really trying to push Mark Henry at this point, and it wasn't really working for me, in my opinion. Obviously, later on in the late 2000s and early 2010s, the whole Hall of Pain gimmick is when Mark Henry would really hit his stride and really, hit the peak of his career. But this, to me, I mean, it was what it was. Kind of, I didn't like their chemistry here. But, I mean, they were trying to get Mark Henry up the card. And I found it kind of a boring match, but it was what it was. And Mark Henry would eventually get there. It would just wouldn't be just yet. Then Shawn Michaels versus Vince McMahon, accompanied by Shane McMahon. And obviously, we would also have the Spirit Squad get involved here in a no-holds-barred match. A match that went 18 minutes and 22 seconds. The second longest match on the card. And obviously there was a ton of storytelling in this match. This was a program that had been building for several months since before the Royal Rumble, when Shawn Michaels told Vince McMahon to let the Montreal Screwjob go. And, it was crazy because at this WrestleMania, Bret Hart was inducted into the Hall of Fame, and I was absolutely convinced that in this match, Bret Hart would come out to help Shawn Michaels defeat Mr. McMahon. Obviously, that did not happen. Bret Hart did not even show up for the Hall of Fame ceremony. Not to say, he was there for the ceremony, but when they come out the next night on WrestleMania and kind of salute the crowd, Bret Hart did not even do that. He did not attend WrestleMania in any capacity, at least from an on-screen perspective. So I was completely wrong with that hopeful prediction. But this match was good for what it was. It wasn't a traditional 5-star match. It wasn't one of your stereotypical, or I guess now what we've been accustomed to what a 5-star match is with the flips and flies, but the storytelling was brilliant. And obviously this match was a means to an end to getting Degeneration X back. This was not a program that would get blown off at WrestleMania. This was just kind of like the first installment of a long list of matches involving Triple H or Shawn Michaels and Vince McMahon that would eventually evolve into Degeneration X versus Vince and Shane McMahon. And of course, at the following pay-per-view at Backlash, we would have Shawn Michaels and God against the McMahons. But I think that this was the first time we saw a foreshadow to Degeneration X. Certainly when Shawn Michaels was getting ready to do an elbow drop, that led to just an absolutely great finish to this match. And just like that, Shawn Michaels kind of just completely embarrasses Vince McMahon, hitting the elbow drop from a 20-foot ladder on Vince through a table while he's in a trash can. Shane McMahon watching helplessly as he's handcuffed to the bottom rope. And during all this, Shawn Michaels very routinely using the DX chops and then gives Vince McMahon a sweet chin music straight to hell. Then we move on to the SmackDown main event, which is Rey Mysterio versus Randy Orton versus the World Heavyweight Champion Kurt Angle in a triple threat match for the World Championship. A match that went only 9 minutes and 19 seconds, which was surprising that, the Shawn Michaels Vince McMahon match went double the amount of time, and especially the amount of build that they had invested into Rey Mysterio going into this pay-per-view. Obviously, he wins the Royal Rumble entering at number 2. And, you have the build between kind of him and Randy Orton. This was essentially Randy Orton versus Rey Mysterio, with Kurt Angle just being the guy bringing the World Championship into the match. That's essentially what this build was. It was built heavily on Rey doing this for Eddie and kind of using Eddie Guerrero's momentum in a lot of ways to bring him into this main event. And a very feel-good story. I'm not a huge Rey Mysterio guy. I never have been. Certainly not in the recent years with his son Dominic. But it was a very good match, although very short match. But once it finally got to the conclusion, as it would surely be with these three just world-class in-ring competitors, it was one that became an instant historical moment.
WrestleMania, Cole! You damn shipping king queen come through! Rey Mysterio's a new champ! At 15 years old, Rey Mysterio began wrestling in a small church in Mexico! 16 years later, his journey culminates, winning the championship on the grandest stage of all, WrestleMania! Oh my God! What a match we witnessed, Cole! Tell you what, major big ups to Kurt Angle and Randy Orton! And congratulations to that man right there, Rey Mysterio.
So Rey Mysterio secures his first ever World Heavyweight Championship. And look, I think this match could have gone a bit longer. Kurt Angle, Randy Orton, Rey Mysterio, just an absolutely amazing trifecta there of wrestlers, all A+ in the ring. But clearly they had invested a lot of time in the HBK and Vince McMahon match that took obviously a lot of time away from this match. But I do think they could have maybe worked on the build a bit better for this, because it was weird that Kurt Angle felt like the third wheel and he was the world champion. But that's always the risk you run when you have a triple threat match for one of the world titles. One of the world titles at WrestleMania, or nowadays just the one world title at WrestleMania. Then in a cool down match in a lot of ways, you have Tori Wilson defeat Candice Michelle in a Playboy pillow fight in just under 4 minutes. Does anyone care? I don't. I mean, kind of tells you where the women were at this point. No real need to break it down any further than that. And then you get the main event. John Cena versus Triple H for the WWE Championship, a match that went 22 minutes. And this was the first time I had ever heard John Cena vehemently booed almost out of the building. And to be honest, it kind of took me back, because I was 12 years old at this point in time, and I was just kind of accustomed to people cheering the babyface, coming out of the era of The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Undertaker and HBK as well. It was the first time I'd ever seen the main babyface just get absolutely turned on. And, Triple H getting a lot of cheers. JR, brilliant on commentary, as always, kept trying to swing it during the match and during the build-up, that it was kind of like the old school versus the new school, and a lot of the fans were old school people in attendance for this in Chicago. And, I mean, this, to me, I think was meant to be the kind of official coronation of John Cena as the man, kind of like the official passing of the torch from a guy who, in a lot of ways, was the face of the company during the Ruthless Aggression era in Triple H, and kind of giving the baton to John Cena, who was a year now removed from his first WWE Championship victory at WrestleMania 21. And you had Triple H, who had not been a world champion in this exact same time frame, 1 year removed from being the world champion when he dropped it to Batista at WrestleMania 21. So you have Triple H as a contender for the World Championship for the first time since 2002 at WrestleMania, but the 5th straight year that he was involved in a world title match at a WrestleMania. So Triple H had been on an incredible run here. You know, a lot of people call it the Reign of Terror, of course, but I think it was just a guy who was carrying the company during an era where the company was somewhat reeling from 2 massive losses in the way of Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock. But even though he had a very good run, in my opinion, it was kind of time to turn the page. And that page, or that new page rather, was John Cena. And, you know, John Cena coming off of a victory against JBL at the prior WrestleMania. You know, nothing against JBL, but for me, he wasn't exactly, didn't have enough cachet, if you will, to kind of officially put over a guy like John Cena and really kind of coronate him. And John Cena, you know, he had faced some big opponents, guys like like Chris Jericho, Kurt Angle, Edge, very, you know, quality opponents, but none in the way of a Triple H, like a true legacy star. He didn't have that one big victory yet. And when the match was coming to a close, you really kind of felt that it was officially John Cena's time. And, you know, this was the 3rd straight year in the main event of WrestleMania that Triple H was left lying on his back. You know, he taps out to Benoit at WrestleMania 20 to relinquish the world title. He loses to Batista to relinquish the world title. And then this year, he absolutely just loses flat out to John Cena in an attempt to regain the WWE Championship, a title he had not held in just about 4 years' time. So a very big a very big pay-per-view. And I think that John Cena's victory against Shawn Michaels the very next year was even more important and significant than this one. But this was really the victory that fast-tracked John Cena into the true face of the company. And after this one, it really was undisputed at this point. Anyway, guys, that's all I've got for you today. I hope you enjoyed the coverage of WrestleMania 22. As always, you can catch me on Twitter at AdaMarket25. You can catch Matt on Twitter at Wrestling_audio, or you can email him each and every week for the WWE mailbag. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoy your weekend. Enjoy Crown Jewel. I will talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening to the WWE Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss a show, or head to WWEpodcast.com. And for all of these shows ad-free, head over to patreon.com/WWE Podcast. Until then, we'll see you next time.